Over the last couple of weeks, we have had an interesting situation going on with Stanford. Their head coach, Troy Taylor, was apparently under investigation for bullying and mistreatment of some of his staff members. We didn't really know what was going on, to be honest here, but we found out a couple hours ago that Taylor has been fired as the head coach at Stanford, and they're going to move in a new direction. Despite it nearly already being April and being super behind, they're willing to go in a new direction with a new head coach, and all of a sudden, Troy Taylor goes out without really doing anything at Stanford. In today's video, I want to do a typical rise and fall coaching video, which I haven't done in a long time on the channel, and talk about how Troy Taylor became a big name and got up to the Stanford level, talk about how he did with the Cardinal, and why ultimately he was fired. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the rise and fall of Troy Taylor. Okay, so in order to understand how Taylor got to this point, let's first talk about his upbringing. He ended up being born in Downey, California, and by the time 1986 rolled around, he became a college football star. He ended up becoming the quarterback for Cal from 1986 to 1989, before brief stints in the NFL with both the Jets and the Dolphins from 1990 to 1993. He would go straight into coaching in 1994, spending time at the high school level and then both at Colorado before returning to his alma mater at Cal. He coached receivers and quarterbacks and tight ends from 1996 to 2000, before he then became an assistant coach at the high school level, before taking over as the head coach at Folsom High School in California. He was the co-head coach from 2012 to 2015, and between then he ended up doing some commentary. In 2016, he ended up at Eastern Washington, where he ended up coaching quarterbacks at Eastern Washington, and also got a chance to coach up Cooper Kupp. Also, side note, he coached Jake Browning when he was in high school. He then became Utah's offensive coordinator from 2017 to 2018, before he would get his big break. He was hired to be the head coach at Sacramento State, which is an FCS program obviously located in Sacramento, California. In 2019, he took over for them, and they had won just 2 games in 3 of the previous 4 years, and had not captured a Big Sky championship since joining the league in 1996. In his first year, Troy Taylor would lead the team to a 9-4 record, and they won the conference. Pretty dang good. The Hornets did not play in 2020 due to everything going on in the world, and then he came back and won the league again in 2021. In 3 years at FCS Sacramento State, he'd end up going 30-8, and then combining that with being an assistant coach for quite some time, he definitely had the experience to maybe move up to the FBS level. He also had a very unique style of offense, and then combining that with leading them to their first ever Big Sky championship in the 3 years he was there, this guy had a good track record. Not to mention, he also had their first ever undefeated regular season. Part of that was fueled by star running back Cam Skattebo. Meanwhile, going down to Stanford, when Andrew Luck took over as a starting quarterback in 2009, through the end of the 2018 season, the Cardinals were tied for 6th most wins in the FBS. They had many good players throughout that time, with guys like Christian McCaffrey and Kevin Hogan. They also went to a couple of Rose Bowls and some BCS Bowls, but things would then fall on hard times after the 2018 campaign. David Shaw had been the head man for over 12 years, but eventually, after 2 3-9 seasons, he would decide to step down. The Cardinals decided to hire Troy Taylor as their new head coach, but it was going to be a challenge. Not only did he not have a ton of head coaching experience, but again, it was at the FCS level, and then there are just some asterisks on the Stanford program. They struggled to adapt to the new landscape of transfers and NIL, they had ridiculously high academic standards, not great fan support, and the administration as a whole at Stanford just doesn't really care about football. The university has been slow to adapt to new times, so Troy Taylor was definitely going to start with his head underwater. How would he end up doing at Stanford though? While the first round of March Madness is over and there's been a lot of chalk, there is still a good opportunity to cash in on the games that are remaining. From the first tip-off to the Final Four, MyBookie has you covered in terms of high-stakes matchups, wild finishes, and big-time opportunities. They've packed in promotions, props, and features that make betting on this event not only exciting, but also profitable. For example, we have 4 Sweet 16 matchups on Thursday night, and if you have a hunch that a certain team is going to win, like Cooper Flag and Duke, you should just go ahead and make that pick. If you're an SEC homer like myself, I'd go ahead and pick Alabama, Florida, or even Arkansas. There are plenty of matchups throughout the rest of the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 and throughout the tournament that you can also make your pick on. When you decided what you're going to pick, go over to MyBookie and use my promo code Fisher50 for your first bet. Despite a calm start to the month of March, I think the madness will finally ensue in these later rounds, so be sure to take advantage of all the craziness. Again, be sure to use Fisher50 over at MyBookie. Thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. When Taylor started out in 2023, he'd have his work cut out for him, as he didn't have much on the roster. Ashton Daniels ended up becoming the starting quarterback for them, and he was not really all that highly recruited. They did have two really good receivers in Alik Ayomanor and Ben Urasek, who ended up at Georgia, but besides that, it was tough sledding for them. Their first year just did not go all that well, and there was not much talent on the roster. They lost 4 of their first 5 games, which included 2 top 10 matchups against Oregon and USC, and he also literally lost to Sacramento State 30-23. This had to be somewhat embarrassing. They would only end up getting 2 wins in the Pac-12, as they would beat both Colorado in overtime and then Washington State 10-7. That Colorado game was pretty crazy, as Ayomanor had a crazy touchdown on Travis Hunter to win that game. So they ended up finishing the season with 3 straight losses to Oregon State, Cal, and Notre Dame, and the team went 3-9 with a 2-7 mark in the conference. This ended up being terrible for them. Fans were not super happy with him, but again, it was just year 1. Going into 2024, hopefully things would be able to change a little bit. They brought in a huge quarterback recruit in Elijah Brown from Mater Dei, but he would not get an opportunity to start. Ashton Daniels would once again be the guy, but he ended up struggling. He had 10 touchdowns compared to 12 picks, and neither Elijah Brown or Justin Lamson could get going. Daniels also became the leading running back though, but they also had guys like Micah Ford and Chris Davis Jr. Alik Ayomanor ended up being back once again, and he had 63 catches for 831 yards and 6 touchdowns, and Emmett Mosley also had a good year, but besides that, the Cardinal really struggled. They ended up having 2 good moments the entire season, which did pave way for some light on the program in the future, but they lost to TCU in Week 1 before then beating Cal Poly in Week 2. In Week 3, they went on the road to Syracuse and actually won that game at the Carrier Dome 26-24, and Stanford was all of a sudden 2-1. Syracuse also ended up having a really good year, so this was surprising. Sadly, there were a lot of losses coming up, as they would lose 6 straight games, 3 of which came to ranked opponents in Clemson, Notre Dame, and SMU. They'd finally get their 3rd win of the season, as they'd play and host number 19 Louisville. This was a backbreaker for the Cardinals, but a big win for Stanford. They won 38-35, and now we're 3-7. With no bowl game around, they didn't really have much to play for, and they lose both of their games to Cal and San Jose State. Once again, the Cardinal ended up only winning 3 games, as they went 3-9 with a 2-6 mark in the conference. After the season was over, Ashton Daniels decided to transfer to Auburn, Alik Ayomanor ended up declaring for the draft, and the cupboard was once again pretty barren. Stanford still had not been embracing the transfer portal either, and it looked like they were kind of just stuck in the mud. That move to the ACC didn't make a whole lot of sense either, and all of a sudden things just really were not going well. But behind the scenes, things were going even worse for Troy Taylor. Going back to some of the stats though, he went 3-9 in his first 2 years, and just 1-10 at home against FBS opponents. The team's lack of success, combined with high academic standards and a new conference, make this one of the most difficult and unique jobs in college football. But as I said, things were going on behind the scenes. Taylor was under investigation, and recently ESPN published some reports. The 2 investigations found that Taylor had bullied and belittled athletic staffers, and also apparently attempted to have an NCAA compliance officer removed after she warned him about rules violations, and apparently made some mean comments to a woman about her appearance. Going back though, the first investigation though resulted in Taylor signing a warning letter in 2024, acknowledging he could be fired if his conduct continued. More complaints led to a second investigation last July. He said, quote, "I willingly complied with the investigations, accepted the recommendations that came from them, and used them as a learning opportunity to grow in leadership and how I interact with others. I look forward to continuing to work collaboratively and collegially with my colleagues so that we can achieve success for our football program together." Things though behind the scenes apparently didn't change a whole lot. The coach would go from, quote, sitting there silently to then screaming. That's what some witnesses said. In some situations, staff members were apparently scared to death to talk to him. Combining all this with probably losing results on the field and not much positive momentum, Andrew Luck and the Stanford administration decided to can Coach Taylor. Luck said, quote, "After continued consideration, it is evident to me that our program needs a reset. In consultation with the university leadership, I no longer believe that Coach Taylor is the right coach to lead our football team. A lot of people are making jokes right now that it's nearly impossible to make Andrew Luck mad or offended, so he must really have done something wrong here. As I said, there were 2 investigations on Taylor, and I guess his behavior just didn't change. Again, some of this stuff is somewhat vague, and I try to keep an open mind on all this stuff because there are plenty of times when allegations turn out not to be true. I think about a situation like Matt Araiza at San Diego State, so while sure, there's been investigations published right now, I want to wait to actually find out the full details before I will cast a stone on this guy. Still though, what he did probably wasn't that great or that charitable, and combining that with his poor on-field results probably led to Stanford deciding to kick this man to the curb. But as I said, I still want to find out more information. From here, Stanford has very limited options as no coach wants this job to begin with, and no coach is really going to want it in the month of April. They're already severely behind with NIL in the portal, severely behind with practice, and all of a sudden you can see some of the best players on the team transfer out, and this is a nightmare situation for them. I think Stanford fans need to give up for a few years on having a successful football team, and Coach Taylor will hopefully learn from his mistakes, and who knows what he'll do with coaching from here, but for now, we'll just have to wait and see what happens with Stanford. What do you guys think though? Why do you think Stanford has struggled to have a successful football program? What do you think of the Coach Taylor accusations? And what topic should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.